Well, everybody, welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. This is your host, Bill Whittle, for episode number 159 of The Gift That Keeps on Giving. Here it is. Actually, they were going to put together a supercut of me throwing this cord over my back. I do it twice a day for the Grant show in the morning, and then I do it for the Hot Mic show, and most of the time I manage to strangle myself or something close to that. So hope everybody's doing well. It's good to see everyone. Back again after having missed last week. Your host is he's still pretty tired. It looks out of focus too, doesn't he? A little bit. In any event, here we are. So as usual, lately anyway, I have not seen the program notes. I haven't read any of the questions or anything like that. And as usual, it looks like I'm a little overcommitted time-wise, so I'm going to probably just jump into this again as quickly as I can and see if we can't knock a couple of these questions out in time to do some more work later on tonight. All right, so what do we have here? Like I said, I haven't seen a look at them yet. I hope everybody's been doing well. These shows have been taking a lot of work, the Hot Mic show, and, I did that with the understanding that, I'd basically just be producing and Mike would do most of the shows, but he's missed pretty much all of them. So that's been more work than I thought. But in any event, we hope to have him back tomorrow, and I don't want to say I'm disappointed in the guy, but, he's just not extremely reliable. Let's just put it that way. Okay, so let's go to our Facebook page and find out what we are talking about here. Oh, by the way, we've got Gabe and Haley working in the back now, and they've been doing a great job. They've been pulling some quotes and stuff, and that seems to be working well, so we're pretty happy with that. And we're getting a little bit of editing help, so we'll be doing a Dave Rubin interview starting either tomorrow or Monday. We've already shot and edited, and it looks real good, so that's pretty cool too. Okay, so let's see. 100,000 things to do and very little time to get them done. So let's look at what we have for the questions for today. And we'll do them as usual in order of rank. Let me refresh this page here because I don't want to make sure we get a fair shake here. Yeah, doing daily television is it's a challenge. It really is. It takes a lot of takes a lot of the day out. But in any event, I'm real happy with it. It's been a lot of fun. So here we go. Looks like Michael Wilson has the. Let's make sure this is the right. Let me just double check this. Yes. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Looks like Michael Wilson has the top ranked question, so we'll just get right into it and see what he has to say. Hi, Bill. Been a fan of yours since my second deployment, where my fellow airmen and I watch your content in our time off. Just that alone is enough to blow my little mind. Michael, thank you very much. A question came up before the election that I found thought-provoking. Wouldn't it be wiser to have a male president simply due to the nature of our current enemies? I'm not saying women can't do the job, but when they're trying to fight such a radical group who sees women as less than nothings, shouldn't we have a leader that will strike fear and respect in our foes? I'm going to disagree with you on that one, I think, Michael, because we certainly made the right choice in terms of striking fear in our foes in terms of the choices we had in December. But if you gave me a choice between Bernie Sanders and Condi Rice, I'm going with Condi enthusiastically. In some ways, it's even better. Their expectations are what they are. I think it's just as a general rule, the people that we've been fighting now since September 11th, actively fighting, have pretty much considered us a bit of a mystery. They were told that we were very weak, and they were told that we were very divided, and we are divided, and we are fat and lazy, and many other things that they seem to think is true. But as they found out on September 12th, that's not been all the fight's not been bred out of us. So the first thing they had to realize was that we're not as weak as they thought we were, and then they had to realize that even Obama was going to kill a fair number of them, even if he did it by remote control and was putting the country down while he was doing it. He kept smocking those guys down with these airstrikes. I know they were launching incredible numbers of missions against all these bad guys during the entire 8 years he was there. So even that was a thing. But my understanding is that there's been a couple of women pilots in both Iraq and Afghanistan, either A-10 pilots or H-64 Apache helicopters pilots who have been women, and that to the degree that news has gotten to our adversaries on the ground, that scares them quite a bit, and it scares them, I think, because it humiliates them. I think your assessment of them is exactly right. I think they have such contempt for women on some level. I think the fact that if they're fighting against the great Satan and they get killed by a girl, I think that probably makes their life even less of a joy than it would be otherwise. So, I think that it's not necessarily that we need a male president to carry on this fight. We need somebody who understands how these kind of males think. You need a president who understands how somebody in a male-dominant society, like many of the Islamic societies that we face, and also like the Nazi societies and so on, these overly masculine societies, these dominant societies are. They need a certain kind of signal, and if we don't give them that signal, then it's dangerous for us. So I think, as I say, I don't think it's necessarily a male thing. I think it's a strength thing. And they're probably starting to get the message that essentially it's a Republican-Democrat thing. I know for a certain fact, having read intercepts of Zarqawi in 2003 and 4 before he got his 500-pound greeting gifts from George Bush, the guy who was in charge of Al-Qaeda in Iraq was essentially astonished at how tough the people we were sending over there were. Now, people like you, for example, Mike, because the people that get all the attention in this society are people like, Kathy Griffith and Sean Penn and Mike Moore. And they figured that we were pretty much all of those things. And when they found out that there were other people in this country besides those kind of folks, I think it surprised them quite a bit. So, So in this case, I think it's more of a personal issue. And speaking of Condi, I would have taken Condi in a heartbeat. I think any Republican woman would have been tougher on them than just about any of the Democratic males. I think Michelle Bachmann would have been harder on him. I think Carly Fiorina would have been tougher on him than either Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama, and certainly more than Bernie Sanders. So I hope that answers that for you. Moving down the list here. Wait a minute, this is not really an exact order, but it's close enough. Susan Speakman is back. Why does the left salivate so much over the idea of getting President Trump impeached? Ever since Nixon, they've dreamed of Republican perp walks and frog-marching officials out of the White House, and yet the only modern president to have been impeached was a Democrat. Is it even up the score, or is it just blind hatred of conservative principles? I got to tell you, Susan, I was salivating over the thought of Barack Obama being impeached, and unlike Donald Trump, at least to date, I think there's plenty of reason to impeach Barack Obama. Plenty of reasons, not the least of which is his Russian connections and his communicating with the Secretary of State using classified documents on unsecured servers, and asked Vladimir to cool it until after the election when it'll be more flexible, and this whole thing in Benghazi was due to a movie, and so on and so on and so on and so on. The difference, I think, is that they knew, and we knew too, that Barack Obama was never going to be impeached. And the reason he was never going to be impeached was because of people like John McCain, who prior to the election in 2008 essentially threw in the towel and said, I'm not going to be the first person, I'm not going to be the person to stand in the way of the first black president. And that would have been a nice thing to have told all of us before we nominated him. But when I remember Mitch McConnell saying in 2013, 14, somewhere in there, saying impeachment is off the table. What do you mean it's off the table? Why is it off the table? It's not off the table, Mitch. It's your job. If the man commits, it doesn't matter who the president is. If the president is committing crimes and misdemeanors and acts of treason or whatever, you don't get to say it's off the table. Your job is to make sure it stays on the table. And furthermore, you idiot, you miserable snapping turtle, Mitch, if you tell the president that impeachment's off the table, then what do you think that's going to do to his already out of control power grab? You moron. But we all know why he said it. He said it because the idea of impeaching a black president is just simply not imaginable to people like Mitch McConnell. And here we are back with the race thing again. And the only thing I have to say about this whole race issue is, if this is how they're going to play, and it's how they've been playing, and it's all they know how to do, then we're going to play that game too. I don't care anymore. He deserved to be impeached for a number of reasons, and the fact that he's black should not protect him from being impeached in the same way that the fact that he's black should not cause him to be impeached. It's pretty simple, really. So, yes, the left hates Donald Trump more than we hated Barack Obama. Hard to imagine, because I was not a fan of his. But I don't think we ever got to the state of madness that we're seeing now. I mean, I was proud to be a part of a number of Tea Party protests and proud to stand in big groups of people or outdoors in events and criticize the guy. But I don't remember being so angry that I went walking down the street and trying to find, Barack Obama supporters and hitting them over the head with a bike lock. I don't remember any of that. So what you've got here is they are so powerless, and it's not even just that they're powerless, because we were powerless in 2008. We had nothing. We had no House, no Senate, no president. We were going to lose a lot of court appointees. We got a wise Latina, and then we got Kagan. Kagan looks to me like the person who gets the coffee for the Supreme Court. But in any event, we got stuck with them, and it was hard. It was tough, but we did it, and we didn't riot, and we didn't do any of these things. The left modern leftism is a philosophy of emotion. Their entire thing is based on wishful thinking. The new firewall I'll be releasing next day or two is based on this. It's called the Republic of Emotion, and it's got to do, just as a launching board, with the fact that when they allow young men, people who are born male, I'm not trying to be politically correct, I'm just trying to make the case crystal clear. I think I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. When they say that a person who's born male but who identifies as a female can run in women's athletics and win everything, then you realize that that person has to run. He or she, whatever you want to call him, has to be allowed to run, because if that person's not allowed to run, then there are, in fact, insurmountable differences between men and women that cannot be wished away. And if that's true, then that means there's an external reality that cannot be wished away. And if there's an external reality that could not be wished away, then nothing that they believe in makes any sense. They know it. The only reason you can have progressivism is if you deny the entire idea of reality. Not that you just argue against reality, you just deny that reality exists. You just keep spending money, and people say, well, what's going to happen when we hit the debt ceiling? Well, then we'll raise the debt ceiling. Well, sooner or later, this debt's going to come due. Yeah, well, it's not going to come due today, probably. So if you wish something hard enough, it makes it so. And this is their entire philosophy. And so that's why transsexual. By the way, this was not even a transsexual person. This was a biological male who simply identified in Connecticut, identified as a girl, and went in there and won every single race handily. If there's an external reality, then the left is doomed, and so they have to pretend that there isn't one. They have to pretend that this is fair, that this is not only fair but noble. But this is where the left starts to eat its own, right? That's what I talked about on the Hot Mic show today, where with what's his name. Their philosophy eventually comes to such a confrontation with reality that it starts to put them into an either-or situation on some of their core principles. They back they back Islam generally because it makes them feel virtuous to say we should allow anybody into the country. Who are we to say that our culture is better than theirs? That gives them that moral authority, little boost, unearned moral authority boost that they like. So they're fine with that until all of a sudden you find places in Germany where women are being raped by Muslims in proportions so far out of control that it's not even, so far out of proportion rather, that it's not even up for discussion what's going on here. And then they're stuck where now they've got women cowering in fear because who outweighs who now? Does our feminist values outweigh our virtue signaling in terms of no, who are we to judge people? Turns out the feminism doesn't outweigh it. That's why women in Germany and Sweden and elsewhere are just running around terrified because they had to make a decision. And coming back to this example of this runner at it's Connecticut, Alanya, I want to say his and her name is. This is where they're stuck. They have to have, if Alanya identifies as a woman, according to their theory, wishing makes things true. So if a person who's born as a boy identifies as a woman, says, I feel like a woman, then he has to be allowed to race with the women, because if he can't, then there's an external reality, and if there's an external reality, nothing makes sense. Then you can't have socialism. You can't have this dream of new people that are going to come and work hard as they do for other people as they do for themselves. And if it turns out that there's a difference between men and women that's insurmountable and real, then there is no such thing as free health care. So you find that they're trapped in a world where they have to stay consistent with their own inconsistency. They have to say, if you want it, it is true. And so that's it. But again, they get in conflict with their own values now because they made this one person, Alanya, happy. And Alanya's parents said, just let her do what she wants to do. Why all the fuss? She's happy. And why all the fuss? Well, the fuss is, what about the 20 young women who had no chance to beat this person? Or the 100 maybe that lost in the case of, the various levels of a tournament, a state championship, all the heats and so on. They had no chance to beat this person, none. And so what about them? What about their feelings? What about empowering women? What about, girls should have a, chance to go out there and compete too. What about them? They're silent on this issue, and they have to be. And the reason they have to be is because this is where their entire philosophy doesn't make any sense. Are you going to back Muslim immigration, or are you going to back the women who are being raped by Muslim immigrants? Are you going to back a person who's born a male who says he's a female and wants to run with the women's category? Are you going to back that guy? Or are you going to back the women who are going to be defeated by this person? Somebody pointed it out. It wasn't me. Somebody said, if you let this go on, I know I'm getting a little off the track here, but that's what the show's all about. They said, if you let this go on, there will no longer be men and women's sports. There will be men's sports and men who identify as women's sports. Those will be the two categories. Because, as I point out in my video, there's many high schools and virtually every college in the country has at least one or two people on the track team. Young males, teenage boys who can run faster than the fastest time ever run by a woman. And that is not something that they can face. I don't enjoy pointing this out. I'm certainly not pointing it out to be mean. I'm pointing it out to say that their entire philosophy is predicated on these huge emotional leaps. And that's hopefully going to help answer your question. They know they can't do anything right now. So they keep waiting for the big bombshell. And to some degree, it's like, well, we were waiting for the big bombshell too, but it seems honestly, genuinely to me, I'm willing to be told why I'm wrong here, but I don't think I am. Seems honestly, genuinely to me that the bombshells we were waiting for were actual bombshells. Hillary Clinton posted, she said she didn't have any top secret information on that server. She had, what was the final number? Does anybody know? 63,000, something like that. Secret information, top secret emails on that server. That is an impeachable, go to prison for the rest of your life offense. And we never saw it because it turns out that the guy who's prosecuting the case, James Comey, who I kept having faith in. There's some reason why Comey's doing this. And it turns out the reason why Comey was doing what he was doing was because Comey is, in fact, as Donald Trump said, he's a nutcase. He's a nutcase. James Comey is fascinated, obsessed with being a celebrity. He's the Judge Ito of this generation. And he is absolutely addicted to the spotlight, being Mr. Square, leader of the FBI, and the unimpeachable source of everything. He's leaking top secret information because he doesn't like the president, and all of this stuff is genuinely actionable in any kind of a society where you have actual rule of law. But the pop culture is the great shield, right? It's the not just the lack of the news media, it's the news media, the pop culture, all of it is the great shield that protects them, and it's protected them so far. So, Susan, they keep thinking the big reveal is going to happen, and they keep getting disappointed. And as long as it's about the Russia story, they're going to continue to be disappointed. That makes me happy. And so when they realize that they can't get their impeachment, then they start to get into their assassination porn. Kathy Griffin holding up the severed head of Donald Trump, or Snoop Dogg, gunning him down in a video, or the famous play in New York City in Julius Caesar where Donald Trump is Julius Caesar and he's stabbed to death, and all the New York liberals give it a standing ovation at the end of every evening, and that's all they've got left now. They've got their infantile temper tantrums, and they've got their street muscle, and they've got their Antifa fascist thug cowards, and they can smash windows, and they can smash things, and they can talk about, the resistance and all that other stuff. By the way, the common sense resistance was never a resistance to government. The common sense resistance was never, as far as I could remember anyway, as far as I could see, was never a, hey, you know what, we've got to blow this system up. It was an alternative to the world turned upside down. And basically, that's what it was, and that's what it remains. But it's not what they're talking about. They're talking about civil disobedience. And I was never talking about civil disobedience. I was, as I recall, I was extremely clear about the fact that, if you're gonna fight against this kind of inversion of reality, the first thing you have to do is you have to obey the law. If for no other reason, then because if you don't, they'll give you a good reason to give them a good reason to lock you up. But more importantly, if you don't respect the law, then what are we fighting for in the first place? So, yep. So they're going to continue to get more and more crazy. There is not a chance, with this quick caveat, if it turned out that Donald Trump did something that was actually genuinely impeachable, then I'd probably be in favor of his impeachment. It would be a tough one because I sure would hate to give them the satisfaction of it, but, principles trump feelings for me, and not the other way around. It's not true for the left. But I don't think that's happened or is going to happen. And so if these Republicans do not do something pretty fast, I don't see any way that we're going to continue to hold the House or the Senate in 2018. And if we lose this opportunity, we deserve everything that's going to happen to us after that. When I say we, I mean the roughly 250 people in Washington who call themselves Republicans. You can't blame the Democrats for wanting to be communists. That's what they are. But when we elected all these people to stop all this stuff like Obamacare, and again and again and again and again and again, they can't do this simple thing that they've been talking about doing for 6, 7, 8 years now, then I'm watching this whole thing just sail away. And if that's the case, then it is time to redraw the political party maps here. By the way, as I've got one last post for Wayne Allen Root that I forgot to put up, but we're going to do, starting next week, we're going to do, or maybe even starting later this week, I did an interview with, oh my God, what's his name? Dave Rubin. And Dave Rubin and I disagree on a few things and agree on some other things. And I think, I said to Dave, I said, look, the two of us together could put together a political platform that would appeal to 80%, 85% of the American population. And I think if these Republicans don't do something pretty quick, then that's going to be the outcome. Star Citizen Matthew Lloyd, who I've had some fun out there blowing things up with, is got the third right question. He said, we sometimes tell progressives that if Obama had been a Republican, they would have protested his entire presidency. Are we holding Trump to the same standard we would if a Democrat? Same standard we would a Democrat? It's hard to imagine the tweets, etc., not getting more of a reaction from the right if he were a Democrat. Should we hold him to the same standard, or is there really something to standing by your guy even when you don't agree with everything because in the end he's fighting for the survival of your tribe? Now, I think he's fighting for the survival of the entire tribe, although the left doesn't understand that. If the forces of reform that voted Donald Trump into place don't succeed, it won't just be the conservatives that'll be finished, it'll be the progressives too, because this world cannot continue the way it's been going on, and everybody knows it. So the question is, do we hold him to the same standard? I think we certainly should hold him to the same standard, but I don't. For instance, I genuinely mean this now. I got into a pretty good discussion with Steve and Scott over this, and off camera as well, after we shot the segment about Donald Trump Jr. and, somebody called him and said we've got dirt on Hillary Clinton, and it turned out it was some Russian person or something. And I genuinely didn't, and I still do not know what the fuss is about. I really don't. If it turned out that Donald Trump Jr. had gotten a call and says, "Hey, we've got some information on Hillary Clinton you'd be interested in," I can't imagine him not taking that call, and I can't imagine him going to some kind of an index in terms of what countries are allowed to. I can't imagine that. I say you take the call, and you find out. Now, if it turned out that a Russian agent or a Russian citizen or something had information on Hillary Clinton that indicated a leak in the American intelligence system, then that needs to go to the FBI right away, and to not do that, I think, is a serious criminal offense. But I didn't see anything like that. I genuinely do not know what the outrage is about when in point of fact, the world we live in is a world where John Podesta we have emails of John Podesta saying we're going to hire people to go to Donald Trump's rallies, and we're going to pay them to start fights, and we are going to rig the primary system against Bernie Sanders, and we are going to do all of these things. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get how Hillary Clinton's server is not an impeachable offense, and Barack Obama communicating with her on it is not an It's nothing there, no story, nothing. But this guy gets a phone call, and he says, well, let's look into it. He looks into it. He finds out there's nothing there, and he says, you know what, this is ridiculous, go away. If he had found out that there was information that was obtained through means that were suspicious, he should have said something about it. If he found out that there was something that was not related to malfeasance on the job, that also presents an ethical issue. But I don't see it. I really don't. Somebody says, "Hey, we've got some information you might be interested in," and was it the Russian embassy that said this? Was it Boris Badenoff come out of the shadows in a trench coat and a fedora saying, "Comrade, we have information on how to stop the election of moose and squirrel"? I don't get it. I just don't get it. Now, Scott and Steve both thought that it was a big mistake on Donald Trump Jr.'s part, but for the life of me, I don't see it. I really don't. But if they want to track this Russian story into the ground, that's fine. We already know that they know it's nothing to it, so let them keep grabbing at these straws as much as they want to. The more they do it, the further away they go. And somebody pointed out, who was it? Was it Andrew? I wish it was. If it was, I should have mentioned it. Maybe it was Andrew. I read an article. I should have talked about it today. But I read an article that said that if you think Donald Trump's going to lose his base anytime soon, they pointed to that video of him getting on the helicopter, and the wind came up and blew the hat off of that young Marine, and he went over and picked up the hat and handed it to him, put him back on his head, and then the wind blew it away again, and then Trump went over and picked it up again, and the Marine couldn't leave, obviously, because he was standing at attention. And this article, as I said, I think it was Andrew Clavin, but basically the article said this goes a long way with people like his supporters, and it does. It went a long way with me, I know. So, yeah, I think we need to hold him to the same standard, Matt, but I haven't seen anything that he's done that's even close to the level of treason and stuff. And by the way, we find out now that the guy who's supposed to be investigating this, the leading counterintelligence official in the country, the head of the FBI, is leaking state secrets to the press in order to damage the Republican president. I mean, that's a story. It was Ben Shapiro, perhaps. I think it was, actually. Thank you very much, Azimuth Smith. I think it was Ben Shapiro. That's a story. And the rest of the stuff I just don't get. I really don't. Let's see here. Moving on. David Wellman is back, and let's see what he has to say here. We need to coin a term for the Russia photos cooked up by the Dems and all their propaganda arm, the press. Red scare doesn't fit. Phobia. Sorry, not Russian phobia. We need to coin a term for the Russian phobia cooked up by the Dems and their propaganda arm, the press. Red scare doesn't fit. Russophobia. A year ago, there were no problems at all. Anything Russia did was fine. It's people, the benefit of the doubt. Now a major political party is dragging the whole nation through the mud for what? Sour grapes? Yes, precisely. Sour grapes, exactly. Sour grapes is the emotional drive, and that's where the heart of it comes from and the head of it comes from. As long as we keep making these accusations and charges, we are delegitimizing Donald Trump, and the more we delegitimize Donald Trump, the better chance we have to either have him beaten in the next election, or the better chance we have to, pull off this impeachment miracle that they think is going to happen, or basically the more they delegitimize Trump, the more they can keep their own Congress people in line and not allow them to vote for any single thing that the Republicans back. As they can basically bully them into saying, how could you possibly help Trump this way? And I wake up and connected to the last question. I really do. I say to myself, is this serious? Am I just blind to this because I don't like Obama and I like Trump better than that? Is it that? And for the life of me, I don't think it is. I look at the things I saw with Obama, and these are serious, serious issues. I look at the things they're making accusations of against Donald Trump. Not only is there not any evidence, but there's evidence of absence. When CNN says, it's pretty much a witch hunt, and we know there's just basically, bullcrap, and I think I'm being fair about this. I'd like to be. I'd like to stay fair about it. And I got off some line somewhere, I think in that right angle, where I said, they're going to stay with it. If it turns out they find out that some intern on the Donald Trump staff went out to dinner in Atlanta and had Russian dressing on their salad, then that's going to be the news for the next 3 days. So knock yourself out, guys. By the way, does anybody actually think that since Hillary Clinton gave the Russians 25% of our uranium in exchange for $100 million or something to that effect, is there anybody out there that actually thinks that Donald Trump is better for Russia than Hillary Clinton? Donald Trump is moving the military in Syria. He's basically confronting them at every turn. He's basically talking about building up the military. If Russia's going to be pulling for anybody, you think the person they would have been pulling for was Hillary Clinton, because they know she could be bought and they know that she hates the country and she hates the military. I don't understand what the whole point of this is. If Russia wanted to influence the election, it seems pretty clear to me, especially since the inauguration, that this is not the horse they want to back for the interests of Russia. This is a guy who's going to stand up to Russia and not hand the ambassador some plastic piece of crap play toy with the word reset on it and make this the basis of America's national foreign policy, for God's sakes. Yeah, sour grapes is what it is. They're using the Russia thing to find an intellectual fig leaf to cover their temper tantrum and their shock and disbelief that they lost this election after they were so sure they were going to win, and it still is the only thing that gives me genuine comfort every now and then. I just wake up and think about that night, and I think about how they've been just having a consistent 9-month temper tantrum, and it's going to be a 4-year temper tantrum, and if they keep it up for 4 years, it'll be an 8-year temper tantrum. Let's see, moving on here. John Frost, being a resourceful conservative, I have decided to align with your thinking somewhat and taking from the progressive playbook, slant the playing field to my advantage. My question is this. I've been listening to Canadian conservative Jordan Peterson lately. I find his thinking quite in line with my own, despite our different countries of... Come on, you bull. Despite our different countries of origin, he indirectly has made me wonder about the notion of constitutional conservatism. The conservatism I follow is directed towards the Declaration's intent as it holds that the Constitution is to be shredded when the time comes, and the corrupted government that it protects rather than the people is to be chopped off. Have you listened to Jordan Peterson's messaging, and what is it you seek to conserve? I have not listened to his messaging, and what I would seek to conserve is the Constitution that should never be chucked off. I don't think the Constitution, if I understand your question correctly, John, the Constitution doesn't say, hey, if the government gets bad enough, it's time to shred the Constitution because it's not working. My understanding is if the government gets bad enough, it's time to shred the government. We certainly are as dysfunctional as we can be. Scott Ott does a segment this week on Right Angle about privatizing water supplies, and the level of mismanagement in the government is unbelievable. He was talking about local government, of course, and it gets worse at the state, it gets worse in the federal level. Scott pointed out, or Steve brought in some kind of an example where it turned out that some cities sold not the water rights, they sold the parking meter rights. They sold something like 75 years of the parking meter revenues in this city. They sold to a private company in exchange for a lump sum of cash. And they gave up 75 years of parking meter revenue for this sum of cash, and they spent the cash that they got in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. So, there's your government for you. So I don't think the government. First of all, I don't know who he is. I do know that there have been times, not so much lately, but times when Canada seemed to be a considerably more conservative country than America, and that is a tough thing to have to face. Although with this Trudeau guy, they've got their Barack Obama, right? They've got their smile and they've got their smooth, and we'll see if they end up paying the same price that we did. I suspect they probably will. Anyway, let's see, moving on here. Matt Karstens, it is my strident opinion, that's good, I like strident opinions, Matt, that as soon as you put on a badge, hold office, or on the public dole, you are a public servant, and as such do not hold the same rights as a private citizen. At the very least, stripping away an inherent right for public servants to have free speech or bear arms, or even protect them from unreasonable search and seizure, and instead be at the mercy of the government, should deter people from wanting to be part of the cancer. Do you agree, or is this too extreme? I think it's a little, I hate to be Mr. Contrary today, but I think it's certainly too extreme. I don't think you have to give up your rights to, as an American, to be part of the American government. On the contrary, I think that sure would be nice if everybody became a member of the American government on some level or another, had some fundamental understanding of what these rights are in the first place. There is, as Mark Viciti points out in the response there, that there is a case or two where this is in fact what does happen, and obviously the big one is the military, where you join the military, you are essentially voluntarily giving up your freedom of action, you're giving up your freedom of speech, you're giving up your a number of freedoms. You are essentially assuming many of the burdens that we that we apply to criminals. You know, your freedom of action is being taken away. Your freedom to say what you want, as I say, is being taken away. That's why I hold military people in such high esteem, because that is a heavy price to pay, especially when you are not forced to pay it, and especially when you do it for such appalling pay and horrible living conditions, and more frequently, you know, the general opprobrium of the chattering classes of those beautiful people just over the hill are so much better than the rest of us. This thing was the same thing with the policing. We were talking about that woman who got shot in her car, and on the Hot Mike show, we talked about this guy. This police officer put up a Facebook post saying, "Where are the celebrities? You know, where are the celebrities talking about her being murdered?" Well, they're not there, sir, and they're not going to be there. And I was talking with the sheriff of Tarrant County yesterday, and he said a lot of people are asking, why would you even go into law enforcement anymore? I mean, if you're not going to get backed by the people, if you're not going to get backed by the president, the government, if you're not allowed to do your job, and if in fact you're being constantly vilified by people like Beyonce and, you know, and all the rest of them, then why would you do it? And he's right. Why would you do it? And thank God that there are people out there whose sense of not just patriotism, but their sense of civilization and law and order and so on are so strong that they're willing to continue to work in the military and law enforcement. Although my understanding, having come from many different places, is that it is a much better ball game now than it was a year ago. And God only knows what it would have been like under Hillary Clinton, who, for all of her manifest faults and real, genuinely disgusting personality, I find her treatment of her security forces to be the single most repugnant thing about that repugnant woman. Shut up! Who the F are you? You know. These are people who've made a commitment to protect her life, and she treats them like, you know, like dirt. And of all the things about that woman that I despise, that's the top of the list. Her just utter disregard for the people in law enforcement and the military, Secret Service, all of them. She's a miserable, horrible, horrible, horrible person. Horrible. And we are very, very lucky that no matter what happens with this president, we're very, very, very lucky that we didn't have to see what she was about to do to this country. Because there's never been somebody, I don't think anybody would have ever gone into the office as corrupt as Hillary Clinton, and I don't think anybody would have come out as corrupt as she was going in. You really have to go back to Boss Tweed and other Democrats to find that kind of corruption. Yeah. Hopefully that'll do it. Let's see here. Our friend Max Wild is back. We haven't heard from him for a while. Max asks about Hollywood celebrities. How much of their animosity to Trump and conservatives in general has to do with preserving their careers, and how much of it is what they truly believe? I would have to say, having known a few of them, a few conservative celebrities and many of the liberal celebrities, I would say the liberal celebrities completely believe it. The few conservatives who speak up about it, and there's not many, you can count them on a handful, you know, John Voight and Gary Sinise and Clint Eastwood and, you know, Patty Heaton, a few others, 10 maybe that you could name. They're committed to conservatism. The rest of them who speak up are very committed to their progressivism, and I think it's probably a fair statement to say that if a celebrity has not ever made a political statement, then chances are pretty good they're conservative. So the neutral position is kind of almost certainly going to be conservative, because the pressure to speak up as a big liberal celebrity is very high among liberal celebrities. The more and more I think about this, it's just an area that's been under the microscope for me more and more for the last couple of years, and that is the psychology of people like Hillary Clinton and people like James Comey's psychology of people like the CNN editors who wrote the most disgraceful letter I've ever read, that intimidation letter saying we found the person who did this and they've agreed to they've issued a sincere apology and they've agreed to stop their disrespectful and disgusting behavior, but we will publish their information if they should ever have the audacity to criticize CNN again. That's simply the most appalling thing I've ever seen in the 13, 14 years I've been doing this. That takes the prize. But you know, they believe it. And they believe it because of a number of reasons, Max. As Andrew pointed out today, kind of cut to the chase on the Hot Mic show. He said, well, first of all, you got to understand they're stupid. He's right. They are very stupid. They're stupid people. And they're emotional people. In fact, they are the most influential emotional people in the country. Most people who are as emotional as celebrities are not in any kind of positions of authority. They're running medical marijuana clinics, and they're out there composting and all the rest of it. They are movie celebrities and pop culture celebrities are by far the most powerful emotional people in the country, and so they believe this. And they are also, I would say, as a class, I would have to say that as an occupation, actors are probably among the most poorly educated people in the country, and worse than that, they not only don't realize that they're poorly educated, they think they're really, really smart. And that's why they have to spend so much time telling each other how smart they are. That's a full-time job, is telling each other how smart we are. And it has to go on all the time because they are so remarkably stupid, which, again, I mentioned this many times, which is why it is so astonishing to me, even after all these years now, 14, 15 years, it still never ceases to amaze me at how little there is there, at how in any kind of a debate you get into with these people, you just keep thinking, all right, well, I got to be prepared to respond to this. There's nothing there. There's no there. They believe what they believe because everybody else believes it. They never examine it, which is why you can stop them in their tracks with one question, In their tracks, they're finished. They just go into smoke coming out of the ears, flashing necklace, Norman coordinate mode. They really don't know what to do. So to get to the actual point of your question, I don't think that there are any conservative actors who are making anti-conservative statements in order to get a job publicly. I know many actors and many people in production and on every aspect of it from the very beginning to the very end who will nod and mumble, yeah, when they're asked, boy, these Republicans sure are a bunch of Nazis, aren't they? Yes. But no one I know that's a conservative will go ahead and openly make a public statement just for the camouflage of it. Anyway, that's my feeling. So, yeah, the left really does believe it, and the many conservatives just look down at their shoes in this business. And a few people have the courage to stand up for what they believe in. And there are many, many conservatives who stood up for what they believe in who are not forces of nature like Clint Eastwood, let's say. And those people are not working like they used to, if at all. So I can certainly relate to that. Hey, look, who's a couple of old-timers back-to-back. Merlin Wendelboe wants to know, so someone was claiming Reaganomics did not work. I said, if by work you mean it didn't turn the USA into a socialist nation, then you're right. But what do they mean by work? And what do we mean when we say it did work? The metric for Reagan's success is Jimmy Carter. And not that that's a hard, comparison to win. That's not just saying you're a better guy than Jimmy Carter is not exactly clothing yourself in, unimpeachable glory. However, it's difficult for many of us to remember just how awful this country was in 1979, 1980 when Ronald Reagan was elected. The economy was in absolute stagnation. Much more evident than that was the idea that the military was not just underpaid, underfunded, underfinanced, and so on. Their morale was probably, you could make a pretty compelling case that the late 70s was the absolute nadir of morale in the United States military. I think it was lower than it was during the Vietnam War. I remember being in college and waking up and hearing the news of, was it Desert One? The rescue attempt. And we put, 4, 5, 6 helicopters out in the desert. And at a staging area before we even got anywhere near Tehran, there's this, dust cloud kicks up and these helicopters collide and there's dead Americans and burned wreckage and we have to leave them there. It's a catastrophe. It wasn't just a failed mission. It was a mission that it was failed. They failed before they even got to the mission. Things blew up before they even got on the mission. And that was the world of Jimmy Carter. And this was what he had let the military, devolve to. And we forget about the labor issues and so on that were going on all the time in the strikes before Ronald Reagan. The Soviets, after the nice thing about the Cold War ending is you get to talk to people who used to be your adversaries, especially when you win. And same thing with the Germans after World War II. We got to look at OKW, Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, memos and so on, and find out what the other side was thinking. And virtually all of the people who have had anything to say about it on the Soviet side, all of them, pretty much to a person, say that the thing that made them realize what and who Ronald Reagan was the air traffic controller strike. And that was that was a month or two into his presidency. And basically, we'd been hit with all these labor strikes all across the country. I can't remember a strike in America. I honestly can't. I cannot remember a labor strike in America, national strike now, on the level of the things we used to see and that used to just paralyze Britain. I just don't remember seeing a strike in this country for 20, 30 years having any effect at all. There may be there. I just don't remember any of them. But, these things were happening all the time prior to Reaganomics and Ronald Reagan and the whole idea. And when the air traffic controllers struck, they were government employees. It was in their contract. They're not allowed to strike. And they decided to strike anyway, figuring that, if we tie up all of America's air travel, that gives us a fair amount of leverage, gives them a tremendous amount of leverage is what it does. But it didn't make it right. And Ronald Reagan didn't negotiate on this. He basically said, okay, that you're not, that when you took the job, you knew that since you're in this public sector, strike is not an option for you. You knew this when you took the job. And since you are now going to threaten a strike, that is a violation of your work contract, so you either go to work on this day or you're all fired. And they thought he was bluffing, and he wasn't bluffing. He fired them all of them at Patco. And that impressed the Soviets very much. I'd love to tell you it impressed me, but I was too stupid to know anything about it at the time. But it is... the thing about the Patco strike that was so remarkable was not that Ronald Reagan went in there and busted up a union. He was the entire point was this is not a negotiable position because going into this that you don't have this. This is not a tool that you have. It's not about whether your grievances are legitimate or not. We're not going to negotiate this because you are basically violating the law. We're not going to tolerate it. And it caused some problems. It caused real problems. I remember I have a friend who was an air traffic controller in the Air Force. He got pressed in at working at Palm Beach, Florida Tower for a while there. And it took a while to get the thing back up and running. But Reagan didn't seem to have a question with it. Cutting the regulations that people point out, Ronald Reagan increased the budget deficit. It's true. And taxes and so on. True, but the roaring 80s were the result of the attitude that came down from the top. And the attitude was one of confidence. And we get right down to it, folks. That's really what it comes down to. It may not sound like much, but it's actually the whole shooting match. An economy is a confidence. I don't want to say it's a confidence game because that gives you the impression that it's illegitimate. But the entire idea of an economy is based on confidence. It's based on the idea that if I go into McDonald's and I hand somebody a piece of paper with a picture of Abraham Lincoln on it, they're going to give me actual food or somewhat food-like matter in exchange for it. And if that's based on confidence, and all of the economic growth is based on confidence. When people decide to invest in something, that's a question of, do they have the confidence? And when the entire country is filled with this malaise, which goes back to Ford as well, it's not entirely Jimmy Carter's fault, but this whole kind of, well, we're just, Jimmy Carter sitting there saying we're going to have to put on our sweaters in the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. Dear God, that was that was as close as communism has ever come to America, as far as I'm concerned, is the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. I remember that so clearly. I was living at the University of Florida, going back and forth between Gainesville and Orlando a lot. It's probably a 4.5, 5-hour drive today, but it was 6 or 7 with that speed limit. And the Florida Turnpike is like, imagine 60 shuttle runways laid end to end and then cranking it 10 degrees to the left and then putting another 60 shuttle runways, laying those end to end and cranking it 10 degrees to the right, flat as a board. This is the most boring drive in the history of the world. And to do the Florida Turnpike at 55 miles an hour was virtually unbearable. And we did it because, we can't get our own energy, and, these Arabs have kind of got us, and we're going to have to conserve, and, it was just terrible. It was terrible. So, yeah, Reagan set the ruin of this country back by 25 or 30 years. And then, after the success of that, Reagan won the Cold War. Well, he did, and he did it consciously. It wasn't an accident. It was strategical policy. It was brilliant strategery on the part of Ronald Reagan, and he understood it. And he was maybe the only person in the entire national command structure level who did understand it. Basically, people were saying Star Wars is not going to work. Ronald Reagan's an idiot. There's no way that Star Wars is going to work. It can't possibly shoot down 25,000 incoming warheads. And Ronald Reagan goes, well, yes, it can. Yes, it can. We're going to put a lot of money into it. Turns out that Ronald Reagan knew that there was no way that this was going to work. But what he did know was that the Soviets were spending 25, 30, 40% of their GDP on defense. We were spending 3-4% of GDP on our defense. And Reagan understood that, well, instead of fighting these Russians where they're strong, which is with tanks and stuff, why don't we fight them where we're strong, which is with the economy? Why don't we do something that's very, very expensive, and we're going to feel it. It's not trivial expense, but we can afford it, and they can't. They can't afford it. And that's why he didn't give up Star Wars at Reykjavik. And I was such an idiot at the time. I thought this is the end of civilization. That was our last chance to have a negotiated deal with the Russians. And Ronald Reagan walked out of there because he wanted to keep Star Wars. That stupid ancient old fool. And there was a stupid ancient old fool in that equation, all right? And it was me. It was genius. And it broke the Soviet Union. They just simply couldn't keep up. Gorbachev was not there to destroy the Soviet system. He was a dyed-in-the-wool communist. Gorbachev wanted to keep Soviet power. But he knew that the economy was, every day, the U.S. economy was pulling further and further away from the Soviets. And even then, at the beginning of the information age, he could see that there's just no way they were ever going to possibly catch up with us unless they did some fundamental restructuring, some perestroika, and have some glasnost, some openness, so that these parts of this fossilized economy could finally start talking to each other, maybe make something. He had to do it because they couldn't afford to compete with us. They had to change things. And by letting a little bit of light in there, that was the end of the whole thing. Once you allow a little bit of light, a little bit of truth into the communist system, the thing just fell down. I don't know if Reagan knew it was going to happen that fast. I suspect he didn't know that. But he did understand very clearly that this is an evil force out there. And instead of trying to build as many tanks as they do and try and fight them in Germany and some other catastrophe like that, why don't we just look at the numbers? What's this spreadsheet say? We're spending 3, 4, 5% of our GDP on defense. They're spending 25, 30, 40%. Let's run those numbers up. Let's double them if we have to. We can afford to spend 7 or 8% of our GDP on defense. It's a lot of money, but we could afford it if we had to. But there's no way they could spend 80% of their 70% of their GDP on defense. It was brilliant. That's Reaganomics. It's all Reaganomics. It's the confidence of a guy who said, no, this country's great, and get out there and make some money because it's good. It's good to work hard and make money. You deserve it. This is what freedom's all about. He wasn't all about, well, we need to lower the speed limit from 55 to 50 to 40 because these the OPEC cartel is charging more money. No, he just didn't do it. He didn't do it. And so I think he was a tremendous asset, and I think that no matter what leftists want to say about him, he beat the Soviet Union. He kick-started this economy. He provided this peace benefit, dividend rather, that Bill Clinton got to coast on for 8 years. And yeah, I think that the case for Reagan is airtight. All right, we'll do a couple more, and then I'm going to have to go back to work. Michael Teuch, sorry. Islam is the fastest growing religion in America and the world, but why? Anyone who does even a cursory investigation finds out much of the bad things we know and many of those who practice it. All one has to do is watch a little news to see. I'm so sorry, it says my eyesight's going. All we have to do is watch a little news to see the problems caused by many of its followers. Do you think that subconsciously these people desire the violence and harsh Sharia law Islam brings? Numerous surveys show that the vast majority of Muslims want Sharia and a high percentage support jihad. Why not move to or try Christianity? What's the underlying motive for these people to move to Islam? I think I can give you a very, very simple answer for that, Michael. And the answer, I think, is crystal clear to me. And the reason that people are joining Islam in large numbers and abandoning Christianity in large numbers is because Islam believes in itself. Islam believes in itself. Islam is not apologetic about Islam. Islam does not basically prostrate itself at the feet of everything else and put itself last. Islam believes in itself. And there are people let's take Britain as an example. It's true for our entire West and all around the world for that matter, but Britain is a pretty good example. So why forget about why somebody who's an immigrant from Islam would want to become a radicalized militant jihadist. That's obvious. They're surrounded in Britain by people who have all of this wealth, all of this comfort, all of the things that they don't have. And they look at the quality of the people in Britain, and all they see basically on the streets are cowards. They see ancient old people who just want to get the whole thing over with, and they see these young, progressive politicians, and especially including the BBC, who are falling down backwards to tell everybody that they think that these people and their way of life is just hunky-dory, and who are we to judge that the West is better than these Middle Eastern countries where so many of these refugees come from. And they see that, and they think, well, if the West doesn't believe in itself, why should I believe in the West? And you can take that exact same thing to Christianity. In Britain, the Archbishop of Canterbury, I think it was the Archbishop of Canterbury. I know the Archbishop of Canterbury made all kinds of noises about, we can't assume that the Christianity is going to be the religion of Britain. He's the head of the Anglican Church, for the love of God. But also, where was it? I don't know if it was in Britain or maybe it was in Norway or something, but this woman who became an ordained priest had decided to take crucifixes down from inside one of these, like church meeting rooms because she didn't want to offend the Muslims that might come here. It's like that is all you need to know. People want to believe in things that people want to believe in things. And if you don't believe in Christianity, and if you don't believe in America, and you don't believe in any of these things, don't be surprised when people start finding something else to believe in. One of the reasons that these people are so radicalized is because no one's standing up for Britain. No one's standing up for America, until recently anyway. It's different here. We still have a significant part of this country still loves this country, stands up for it, and is ready to fight for it, both physically and rhetorically. But in Europe, who's going to stand up for? No, who's going to? If you're a young person, forget you either a Swedish person of Swedish heritage, or you're a person living in Sweden, and you're of Ethiopian heritage. Doesn't matter which one of those two things you are, or Sudanese or whatever. It doesn't matter. You move to Sweden, and the question is, on one hand, you've got a group of highly motivated, fired up people who are convinced that the future belongs to them and that they are the future. And on the other hand, you have a bunch of people who not only so little believe in what they say they believe in, that they're just terrified of offending anybody by simply stating what it is they believe. Who do you think you're going to join? Especially what kind of people do you think are going to make that decision? All the hotheads, all the people with passion. This is why these you don't see a whole lot of these stories, but you're going to see more of them. You see these European young women, right? These teenage girls or whatever. They're 18-year-old, these two German girls, and they decide they're going to run off to Syria and join ISIS. And they did. And they did it because their men are completely neutered. The German men that they had are just, or the Swedish men or whatever, they're absolutely neutered. They're not allowed to be men. They're not allowed to be strong. They're not allowed to believe in anything. Not allowed to be tough. Not allowed to do anything. They're required to be these weaklings and these milquetoast nothing burgers. And they see these savage men around them, but they're men, and they go. So these naive, very stupid, young white German girls go to Syria to join ISIS, and the first thing that happens is they're made into slave brides, and they're raped by large numbers of these people, and then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, they don't like ISIS anymore, and they try to get out, but it's too late to get out, so they're killed. And how would they know, right? I mean, how would they know? They're in a society in Europe that's become so completely feminized that when they see any kind of strength, any kind of commitment, any kind of passion, any kind of belief, any kind of willingness to give your life for something greater than you are, they see it, and some people want to be a part of it, even if it's something as awful as that. Even if it's something as awful as that. So, if it turned out that Christians had the same, and you still see a lot of this in America, but certainly not in Europe, if it turns out that Christians had the same belief and the same passion in their religion as the Muslims do, you wouldn't see this problem. On this subject, there is a guy who I met. I want to say his name is Father Flieger. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I think so. And he is an Eastern Orthodox priest who I saw out in San Bernardino at an event I do every year in Redlands. This was probably 2 or 3 days after the San Bernardino massacre, and I was there, and I'd seen him once or twice before. The man is gigantic. He looks like Rasputin would look if Rasputin was a really good, decent guy. He's gigantic. He's 6'3" or 4", and he's dressed in the black robes of the Russian Orthodox Church. And he got up there on stage before I went up there, and he gave a talk about Christianity. And as you were listening to this man speak, I remember thinking, hey, this guy really believes this stuff. He really does. He doesn't seem to be ashamed of this at all. He doesn't seem to be apologizing for his religion at all. He seems to really believe in it. And I believe in it too now. I'm with him. I'm with him 100%. He was absolutely calm, but he was passionate, and he wasn't so much hate-filled and all the rest of these nonsense liberal terms, but he was a committed believer in his religion, and when you listened to him speak, it made you want to be part of his religion and part of his congregation, because he's talking about important issues with the force of reason and logic, but mostly passion. He believes it. And if you had those kind of Christians everywhere, you wouldn't have this problem in Europe, but you don't, because the society is so rotten that we think that the only way now to show that we're good people, we've been so indoctrinated about how awful we are, they think the only way we can atone for being who we are is to basically go up to somebody who wants to kill us, hand them a knife, and then just hold our own head back and wait for them to saw our heads off, and that'll make it even. That'll show them what fundamentally good people we are underneath. It was certainly Andrew Clavin who talked about this, and I hadn't really made the connection before, but many years ago, he was talking about this whole death wish that the West has is a result of Nazi Germany. It's a result of seeing what European white males were capable of, and that this whole thing, this whole virus, was planted there, and planted indiscriminately. And by that I mean, yes, the things that the Nazis did were beyond imagination. Soviets too, for that matter, but they didn't have pictures. But let's not play that comparison game, at least not right now. What the Nazis did was simply the worst thing in history, and it's not just to the Jews. What they did to the Russians, what they did to the Poles, what they did to everybody, it's inconceivably evil. And it was from an extremely advanced culture in terms of philosophy and science, in terms of music and so on, and the whole species, I think, after World War II had this allergic kind of reaction to it. And what never got mentioned was, yes, it's true, the Nazis were horrible, horrible people who murdered millions of people. And the communists, also white Europeans, murdered millions and millions of people. But the people who stopped these murderers were also predominantly white Europeans. And the fact that it wasn't completely white Europeans, the fact that the United States was a multicultural society even then, is wonderful. And that's who stopped it. And it was essentially white Christian males who stopped slavery in this country. They stopped it. They fought for it. They didn't just let it go. All of these lessons are lost. We destroy ourselves because we have to be at war with something. It's how we're built. We're built to fight. We're built to worry. We're built we're built for conflict. And our military and our economic power and everything and our cultural power has been so great that there's been no real threat to this country since August 9th of 1945. Really, we haven't had that kind of threat since then. And so, 75 years now or something, we haven't had to fight anything, and we haven't had to worry about anything in an existential way, so we fight ourselves, and we're bored. We're bored. And this boredom is exhibited as a death wish in many, many places on the left. And just because these people are bored and want to die and they don't like themselves doesn't mean we have to go along with them. They're certainly welcome to do whatever they want to, but the rest of us who are not so empty and not so filled with nothing, who don't have this big black gaping hole of unmet emotional need in us, we don't need to prove how decent we are by rolling over to savages and murderers. We prove how decent we are on a daily basis by what we do with our lives and the people we help and the things we make and so on. So, yeah, I don't know. Matthew Lloyd's back. I think I'll go till 7:30, another 10 minutes, and I'm going to have to split. Two Democrats just introduced articles of impeachment against Trump. There's absolutely zero chance Trump will be impeached based on what they have. They are wasting the time and money of the American people for nothing. There are repercussions for frivolous lawsuits. Would you be in favor of a law that allowed for prosecution of politicians for the misuse of public funds and public trust in situations like this? Like any legislation, is that something that could come back to bite us in the future? Yeah, absolutely, it could, Matt. I mean, you can't basically look, to the degree that these two Democrats are wasting public money. I'll be honest with you. I'd much rather have them spend their entire days. In fact, I wish the entire Democratic Party, in fact, perhaps all of Congress, did nothing but pursue impeachment, because if they were pursuing impeachment, the money they'd be wasting would be microscopic to the money that they would be wasting if they're going about their normal business of spending $10 billion a day. A day. So, no, I don't think you can basically say, well, because where does that go, right? I mean, if it turns out that you always have to look at the world as if it were reversed. This is why one of the reasons they're having the temper tantrum they're having is because Democrats governed as if they would never lose again. And they did lose, and now they're stunned, shocked. So let's say we were to put a policy like that into place, and we say this is a frivolous use of public funds, and therefore we're going to fine you or sue you or whatever. Well, what happens when it's not a frivolous use of public funds, What happens if there is legitimate reasons there for an impeachment? By the way, I don't think there's any possibility that this is correct, but on some level, it's good that they're trying to find cause for impeachment. That's how the system's supposed to work. If they were putting this kind of effort into Barack Obama, we wouldn't have any problems. You know, they're supposed to be looking for corruption. They're supposed to be bringing all this stuff to the fore. And if it turns out they got nothing, then they got nothing. That is evidence as well. But I'd much rather have a robust system where people are constantly looking into what's going on and constantly trying to ferret it out and bring it to the light of day and bring legal consequences to it, even if it's something driven by these idiots and these maniacs. The system is supposed to work that way. And so it's, you know, I wouldn't want to mess with that or do anything to intimidate that. I think the entire purpose of government is people, of our government as it's structured, is people trying to say, hey, that guy's in a different party than us, let's find out what we can find on him. If that's your motivation for finding corruption, then okay, I don't care what your motivation is as long as you root out the corruption. My problem is when the entire city politically, the entire country in terms of the media and the pop culture decide that only one party can be investigated and the other party not only is not investigated but is covered up, then you've got a broken system. So that's where I would probably draw the line there. Let's see here, maybe do one or two more at the most here. Steve Darrow, hey, look at all the crowds here. I won't be there live tonight since I'm stuck at an airport. So is there an aviation question? Here's an aviation question of sorts. If you had a craft capable of making a nonstop trip from one point on the globe to its exact antipode, what would factor into your selection of the Great Circle navigation route to take? For the record, I realize that the only point in the U.S. with a dry land antipode is Hawaii, and that it falls somewhere in Botswana. My question is just a brain teaser. I'll just do that very quickly, and then I'll answer one aviation question I saw in the comments, and then I think I'll probably call it a night. What would factor into my navigation route to take? I think the factor is what is the shortest route. I don't know if any of you have ever flown, long distance, intercontinental distance, but if you have, you've probably been as surprised as I have at the course you take. For instance, I flew from Los Angeles to Thailand. My thought was we would take off to the west. We would continue west around pretty near the equator. We'd pass somewhere south of Hawaii, and then we'd come up on Thailand from the west and somewhat north of Australia. Just come in like you would look at it on a flat globe, on a flat map, rather. That's not what we did at all. The quickest way to go from Los Angeles to Thailand is to take off from Los Angeles. When you get to the beach, which is 10 seconds after takeoff, you make a right. You don't keep going west. You make a right. You fly up. We flew up the entire Pacific coast of the United States, the Pacific coast of Canada. We went all along the Alaskan coast. We went over the Aleutians. We came down through Russia. We came down through parts of China, and then we came to into Thailand from the north. And looking at this on a map, you're absolutely stunned. But when you look at it on a globe, and if you want to prove it to yourself, just get a globe and a piece of yarn, just some kind of flexible string. You put a pin where you are, and you run that yarn to where you want to go, and you try to find the shortest route. And in most cases, it will be, for European travel, it will be over the North Pole. It's just much shorter, although there's no way to tell that because, number one, we hardly ever have globes. We almost always have flat maps. And number two, most of these Mercator projections grossly distort the northern latitudes, and so it seems nutty to go that way. But nevertheless, the criteria for any position, any aircraft position, any kind of course at all, if you want to get from A to B, the criteria is what's the fastest route. However, there is a question about aviation I want to touch on because it does bring up some interesting conflicts with my overall philosophy, and that was when we were talking about the air traffic controller strike earlier. Somebody in the comments section, I forgot who, maybe they'll remind me, said we should privatize air traffic control in this country. And you know me, I'm a big believer in privatization, and I generally think that a private company can manage things much better than the government and so on. But I have said also that there are some things that the government should do that private companies either can't do or shouldn't do, and air traffic control is one of them, and I'll tell you why. There have been now, because of the budget deficits, there have been for years, decades, an effort to save money by privatizing the air traffic control system, which normally, if it were pretty much anything else, I think swell, beautiful. That's great. And if it turned out that what they were talking about was taking the money that we spend on the federal government and handing that money over to Lockheed Martin or somebody and having air traffic control be the way it is now, then I'd probably be in favor of it. I'm sure they could do a better job of it, but that's not what they're talking about. What they're talking about is they're talking about a pay-as-you-go kind of thing, which basically means that you would have an account and you would be charged for the air traffic control that you use. Again, on the surface, that looks relatively fair, but it's a very, very bad idea. And one of the reasons it's a bad idea is because, generally speaking, Southwest Airlines has a bigger budget than, Uncle Lou, who's flying his Cessna 172. But if they both have to pay the same for the same kind of services, then you're going to have a problem there. But basically, in a nutshell, they do this in Canada, by the way. Canada's got a kind of a privatized system, kind of a hybrid as always in Canada, government-private kind of thing, a bit like our postal service, I think. But the privatization terms or schemes that I've heard for, did I say schemes? That's what British use those words. I've always hated that term. The plans that they have for privatizing air traffic control would be kind of a pay-as-you-go kind of thing. And what that would mean is that every time you flew an instrument approach, you'd get charged for it. Every time you called for any kind of heading or any kind of information, you get charged for that too. And that's very dangerous. It's very dangerous because if people are financial, what you don't want is you don't want to incentivize people to not use air traffic control. You don't want it to be set up so that the more you use, the more expensive it gets, because everybody will then basically try to save money by using as little of it as possible. And that's really, really, really bad. It's a bad, bad, bad idea. If it turns out that if it turns out that flying an instrument approach and you're in somewhat iffy conditions, you're not in full instrument conditions, but it's a little dicey. And it turns out that you want to fly an instrument approach back to your airport and then do an instrument approach into the runway, and it turns out that's going to cost you $50 or $100. A lot of people are saying, I don't want to spend $50 for this thing, so they don't do it. Next thing you know, they're out there in the weeds and they're flying in the mountains because they wanted to save a little bit of money. I would hate to think that every time I wanted to call ATC, I had to pay for it, because there have been many times when I would just simply call to make sure that I understood something. When you get an instruction from ATC, you have to read it back, and so you do. But there have been times when I've read back something, read back a clearance, or read back a position, or read back sequencing, whatever. When I've read it back and I realized he's told me to do something, and I've agreed to do what he said what he asked me to do, but then I realized I'm not entirely sure I know what that is. I think I do, but I'm not entirely sure. And it's been my ongoing habit and policy to say to myself, if I have any doubt whatsoever, call him and ask him. It's better to look like an idiot and not, go into a mountain. And by the way, I don't think anybody thinks that you're an idiot if you're a pilot and you call and ask for clarification. On the contrary, I suspect that most people would respect that. I certainly do. So if I had to be thinking about, well, it's going to cost me another $50 or whatever to make this call, or it's going to cost me $50 to go around, or it's just a very, 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 very bad idea. We should be, I don't want to say we should be paid to contact them more, but it's just not. It's not good, and AOPA has been fighting it forever, and the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. It's the big pilot lobby. It's the NRA for pilots, basically. And they're very good too, just like the NRA. I've been fighting it forever, and I didn't understand why until somebody told me why, and I realized no, you don't want user fees for something like this. You want to be able to have the freedom to go out there and use or not use the service based on what you think is good for safety and not based on what you think is going to save you money. So I'm dead set against it. And by the way, I don't know what the air traffic control system costs in this country. I know we could do with a little less FAA, but in terms of the scheme of things, in terms of what it accomplishes, and just the revenue and the economic activity generated by passenger air travel, just that is enormous. You throw in air cargo and all the rest, that's enormous. And then you throw in people want to fly around for the weekend in their bug smashers, that's actual freedom, and that's important too. And the cost of this system is utterly insignificant compared to what we spend on other things. I mean, it's not even a drop in the bucket. You can't even see the bucket. So I think this is one of the things that the government is supposed to do. I don't think that we can live without any government. I think it's a good example of something that the government should probably do to the degree that they can do it more economically. Great. And as I say, if they were to come up with a system where it was handed off to private sector but was not being used on a pay-as-you-go kind of a thing, where it was coming from our tax money and not that I was going to get my air traffic control bill for the end of the month, I think that might be worth discussing. But the problem is these things tend to drift, and I just think it's a bad idea. Yeah. That's kind of where I am with that. So there's our aviation question. And I'm sorry to have to go so early. I know it's we're used to doing the 3-hour marathons, and we're just barely at an hour and a half. But your host is a hard-working boy here, and he's just taking on so much stuff. We do have some extra editing help, however, and we'll be bringing in more after hours. We'll be bringing back time over targets and all the rest of it because I just simply didn't have the time to do all of this stuff. We put out about 3 or 4 videos a day. I know I do Grant every day. I do Hot Mic almost every day. 1 right angle a day, and then you throw in, Stratosphere lounges and everything else. It's quite a bit of work. So I am going to have to abandon this this post now. But I really much rather do a short show than no show at all. And a short show is an hour and a half. So considering what you pay for it, I guess it's probably a pretty good deal. And that'll do it for episode 159. My goodness gracious. It just keeps coming, doesn't it? Let me just check the calendar. Don't think there's any problem with next week. Nope. There's not. I should be around, I think. So looks like next week, same bat time, same bat station will be good. And as always, thanks to all of our loyal Stratologers out there. I get to meet every now and then and hang out with. Just a very brief word again, I have not sent any emails to any of the people that wrote about Star Citizen. I'm stuck in neutral with that thing. I can't get any of these videos made, and I need to put a demo together. If I put a demo together, I can get some money for it. If I can get some money for it, we can take it seriously. So sorry about the delay on that, but it's... They delayed the opening of all of these features again on the game, and looks like it's going to be probably mid-August now. So if it doesn't get bumped again, but in any event, that's still afloat, and I'm not going to be talking about that right now. But if you send in an email about that, I haven't responded yet because I don't really know what to say just yet. So that'll do it. I'm going to start heading home here in a few minutes, and thanks again for joining us. Stop clicking around. Was that this? This is a box cutter, man. Don't mess with me. Yeah, so that'll do it. And thanks again for joining us. I really do enjoy talking to you guys. It's always good to see the same old familiar faces out there, and I certainly it's a very, very big part of what I like about this job. So thanks again for joining us. And yeah, it was me with my box cutter, Dave Big Booty. I guess microphones pick up certain sounds better than others. Yeah, hopefully that'd be plenty annoying for all of you. Okay, that'll do it. Again, thanks again for tuning in. Thanks again for watching. Thanks for all the help and the support, as always, emotional, financial, physical, and all the rest. And I will see you guys, I'll see you next week.